Sir, we have an executive order requiring that Essendon Football Club win a final in 2025.
That's a big one, huh? A lot of people are waiting for this for years, for decades. Okay. Okay. Thank you very much.
Well, the Bombers have defeated the Melbourne Demons 15-6, 96 to 8-9, 57 over there in Gather Round in Adelaide in what you'd have to say was a very, very professional performance. We got away to a 6-goal lead early. We were challenged in the third quarter and we responded. I thought it was a really, really professional performance by the boys. And it just so happens that the dream that everyone has of Melbourne getting the wooden spoon and Essendon getting the number 1 draft pick, unlikely as that might seem, is now a realistic possibility.
Oh my God! Okay, it's happening. Everybody stay calm.
We're going to get straight into the content now, and we're going to start off with what happened from the first quarter. So the first quarter really was all Essendon. We won the quarter statistically 22-10, but we really should have been 3 or 4 goals up. We were tougher, we were harder. We had an incredible 131 possessions in that quarter, which was an enormous amount of possessions, and really it was set, at least from the first quarter, from the opening 5 seconds when Setterfield laid a big tackle. I thought that was a good statement for him to make. Unfortunately, Nick Bryan got injured early in that first quarter, but it did give an opportunity for Saad El-Hwali to come on as the sub early and get a full game into him. He didn't get a full game, obviously, against Port Adelaide, only came on in the last quarter. So he came on halfway through the first quarter, and he gave us a bit of run as well and a bit of dash. And that's unfortunate for Nick Bryan, but unfortunately, when that happens, there is opportunity that opens up, and Saad El-Hwali had a pretty good game. Durham made a nice inside 50 kick to Jones, who kicked the point. Jones had a couple of shots, actually. There was a great spoil by Mackay as well early in that quarter. I thought that was good. It looked like Melbourne were going to get a goal over the top, and I thought that was a good effort by Mackay. Menzies kicked a nice snap and got a goal. I thought that was pretty good. Durham was fantastic. His desperation was really, really good, and I thought he was probably, one of our probably best players in that quarter. Hobbs also kicked a nice little snap goal. It was good to see him get amongst the goals. Not really a known goal scorer, but Shield really was the one who just had the ball on a string. He had 14 possessions in that first quarter. Martin had 11. McGrath also had 11. Roberts had 9. Merritt had 8. Setterfield had 8. And Setterfield had 4 tackles. I told you guys that Setterfield was probably in the team because of his, he's a big-bodied player to go up against the likes of, Oliver and Viney and Petracca. Even though Petracca was thrown in the forward line in this game, he was thrown, he was in the forward 50 and wasn't really playing in the midfield. But really, Setterfield, 4 tackles in that first quarter was a really good performance. So really, the Bombers really should have been further up at quarter time, but as it was, we were leading 22-10, which was a good start. If you like this channel, please hit the like and subscribe buttons. It helps the YouTube algorithm when you do so. It will ensure you never miss a video. It doesn't cost a cent, and it takes just 1 second to do so. Now, I keep the calls to like and subscribe short and sweet, around 10 seconds or so, because I know your time is valuable and you guys are here for the content. But if you'll just allow me this short indulgence, about 75% of the people watching this are not subscribed. I'm trying to get up to 1,000 subscribers, and I'm at around 855 now. So if you do enjoy this content, I would be grateful if you could subscribe and help me reach this milestone. I would really appreciate it. So the second quarter was a good, solid defensive effort from the Bombers. We led at halftime 46-17. We've had 164 uncontested possessions to 117, so we're dominating possession in this game. Melbourne did seem to get the ball quite a bit in the middle of the ground. Petracca was moved back into the midfield where he plays his best football, and they went with a smaller forward line. But they were just inefficient every time they go forward. In fact, the only goal that Melbourne was able to get was from a 50-metre penalty where Martin crashed into Langdon, I think it was, and there was a bit of a fracas after that, and Langdon kicked the goal, and that was the only goal they got. They did get the ball inside 50 a lot. In fact, they went inside 50 more than we did, but they're only taken 2 marks inside 50 for the whole game up until half-time, Melbourne, which, and as I stated in one of my previous videos, this was one of their weakest parts or statistics this season, Melbourne. I think they rank either last or second last for marks inside 50. Up until half-time, we'd had 7 marks inside 50 to Melbourne's 2. I thought there was really good pressure from Kako at one point, which led to a Menzies goal. Menzies kicked 3 goals, would you believe? Playing like a Brownlow medalist down there is our Jai Menzies at half-time. But there was really great pressure from Kako in the right-hand forward pocket, which led to a Menzies snap. That was fantastic. Caddy was paid a lucky mark at one point, which I thought he probably didn't quite control, but he was paid it and he was able to kick a nice little goal from 30 metres out. Caddy was intent on trying to kill himself at one point, I think, throwing himself everywhere. I think he got badly winded. It looked like he'd hurt himself badly, but looking at the replay, I think it was just how he landed. It's always a worry. You're always worried if a player's going to get a knee to the kidney or something. You look at what happened to Petraka last year, and it could be, that's a very serious injury. That's always the worst goes through your mind when you see Caddy lying there like that. But the replay showed that he landed on his back, and I think it just winded him, and took the the stuffing out of him a bit. But he was back, and a couple of minutes later, flying for marks. Shield kicked a nice goal from 40 metres out. Not always a reliable goal kicker, Shield. He does tend to spray them, but he's had a magnificent game up until half-time. 20 possessions and a goal up to half-time, doing everything you would expect or hope from him so far. A brilliant 70-metre kick from Draper at one point. Draper got the ball. You don't associate Draper with being able to kick drop punts very well, but I reckon this was a 70-metre drop punt that he kicked into a wide-open forward 50 to the run of Menzies, and Menzies kicked his 3rd goal from that. That was a magnificent kick. It was just about the kick of the year, I thought. I think the commentators glossed over it a bit and didn't realise how good it was. This kick travelled at least 65 metres. It might have even gone a bit further. And it went straight into the open arms of Menzies, who kicked the goal. So, look, a fantastic defensive effort from Essendon up until half-time. To keep Melbourne to 2 goals, one of which is from a 50-metre penalty, you really, can't complain about that at all. That's just a great effort up until half-time, a great defensive effort. And look, up until half-time, we have conceded only 77 points from our last 6 quarters of football. So, the feeling at half-time, of course, is can the Bombers go on with it? So the 3rd quarter started off pretty good with a nice goal to Perkins from a tough little angle there on the wrong side for a right footer. That took us out to a 35-point lead, but from that point on, it was really all Melbourne. Midfield started to get on top. They were playing a bit more attacking football. Petty got a goal. Fritsch got a couple of goals, and it looked like we're going to Essendon it again. But we were able to steady. Dersma kicked a nice steadier. And Martin got a bit of a lucky goal at the end when there was a drop mark. I think the drop mark might have been from Gawn. And that put us 3 goals up at 3-quarter time. I mean, look, there's always a point in the game where a reasonable team, and, Melbourne are, I know they're struggling, but they're not, I don't associate them as being as in a dire situation as someone like a Richmond or someone like that, or West Coast at the moment. They're always going to challenge you at some point. They've got good players. They've got 15 premiership players, and they threw down the challenge, kicked 4 goals in a row at some point, and there was always going to be that moment in the game. And to me, it was, well, how do we respond? And we responded with a couple of late goals there with, like I said, Dersma and Martin just giving us that 3-goal edge at 3-quarter time. It was really going to be how we responded in the last quarter, and I thought we handled the last quarter brilliantly. Not just the fact that we went on to, win by 39 points and the final margin of the game was the biggest margin of the night for the Bombers. It wasn't just that, and the fact that we kicked 5 goals to 1, but I thought we controlled the play. I thought with about 8 to 10 minutes left, we played possession football, we chipped it around, we were playing sensible football. I mean, Melbourne just couldn't get their hands on the ball. And I thought this was really professional. I thought it was, all the team was engaged in it. All the team was together. They all knew what they were doing. I think it was almost like circle work for about 4 minutes. And, I guess it should have been easier to stop if you're Melbourne. You just got to man up. But really, we just said, well, we're going to control this game. We're going to slow it down. We're going to take the fizz out of the game. And that's exactly what we did. And you could tell Melbourne's heads were dropping at that moment. And once we got that last goal, I think the 3rd last goal to Hobbs, which made the difference, about 5 goals, that was it. We weren't ever going to be looking back from that point on. We kicked a couple of late goals in the last 13 seconds. Menzies kicked his 4th goal. that's probably his best game for the club. I don't think he's kicked more than 4 goals in a match. He normally sort of floats in and out of games, Menzies, but as a small forward down there, he did his job, and he did pretty well last week as well. So you have to give him credit where it's due. I've been critical of Menzies. A lot of people in the comments here have been critical of him from time to time, and that's fine. But look, when you play a good game, you got to call it as you see it, and he played well, as did a lot of his teammates tonight. So if we just go through some of the numbers tonight, at least from some of the individual players. Zach Merritt was probably the best player on the ground. He had 37 disposals. He's been kicking goals this year. Actually didn't kick a goal today, but even so, he's been getting a lot of the possessions forward of centre. Now, I heard a stat during the week that last year he had only 40 possessions, or 40% of his possessions were forward of centre. This year, it's 70%. And to me, that's obviously very good from Merritt. It's also good coaching, because they've realised, okay, Merritt is an A-grade player, but to really make him an elite player, he needs to hit the scoreboard. And he only kicked a behind tonight, but he was, it was easily the type of game he could have kicked a couple of goals. He didn't really have the opportunity down there, but he's getting 2/3 of his possessions in the forward half of the ground, which is absolutely fantastic. Nick Martin had 28 possessions, kicked a goal. Archie Roberts, who I know firsthand, the coaching staff absolutely love this guy, had 28 possessions and 107 champion data points. A great night from Archie Roberts. He was like a rock all night, reliable. Setterfield had 21 possessions and 10 tackles. Can you believe 10 tackles to Setterfield? A lot of people might not mention that. It might not come out in the paper tomorrow. It might not be mentioned on other channels. Well, I'm mentioning it here. Setterfield had 10 tackles. I said 2 years ago he was our leading tackler, not in total, but in average per game, in terms of, because he only played, 8 to 10 games or whatever. And that's why I think he was brought into the team this week, given that Sartis had the broken hand, and also the fact that Sartis is more slight in terms of his body shape. Draper, I thought, was really good as well. Especially given the fact that Nick Bryan went down, he had to do a lot. Didn't hit the scoreboard as he normally did. I would like to see him, do his little around the corner kick, but he did that massive, that magnificent 70-metre pass to Menzies in the third quarter. Actually had 22 possessions, 110 ranking points. Ridley, 26 possessions, 106 ranking points. Durham, 28 possessions and over 100 ranking points. He was like a bull tonight, and reliable as well. He was part of those players in that chain of possession in that last quarter that would just hold on to the ball and we would just chip it around as well. So he was doing the team things as well as doing the inside dirty stuff. Menzies had the 15 possessions, 4 goals up front. Great game from him. Dylan Shield, 30 possessions. He had over 20 at half time, a little bit quiet in the second half, but kicked a goal. His game was elite, and really in the first half, when we set up the win, that's what he'll be remembered for in this game. Zach Reid probably had his best game for the club. Not a big statement, he's only played 15 games. Had 21 possessions, 10 marks, 104 ranking points. This is what we want to see from Zach Reid. Top 10 draft pick. He just needs to get some games into him, and in addition to that, what he also needs is confidence. And I've always felt a player like Zach Reid, 2 things. He needs to not be injured. He's getting through a few games at the moment without being injured, and he just needs to put a couple of good games together to give him the belief that he can make it at this level. And if he plays like he has for the last couple of weeks, then we've got a 10-year defender on our hands down there. Hobbs also played one of his best games for the club, kicked 2 goals, had 20 possessions, bit of a nuggety play down there. Redmond was pretty solid, 22 possessions. He kicked that great goal at the end from outside 50. It's good to see him sort of do that once every couple of weeks when he can kick those big, long goals. McGrath was solid. Gresham was solid. Everyone played pretty well. El Hawali did a little bit. He gave the team a little bit of run. He had the 4 tackles as well, El Hawali. I thought that was notable, given he had 18 possessions. I always look how many tackles these players get. Perkins does tend to fly in and out of games, but, kicked an important goal and, probably had a passable game, I thought. Dersmer, a little bit quiet, but did a few nice things. Mackay was solid. Kako didn't have a huge game in terms of numbers, but he put pressure on. There was one goal I mentioned earlier in this video that came directly from his pressure in the third quarter, and he looks likely. There was moments where, okay, he wasn't down there necessarily kicking goals, but you could just see him causing a bit of havoc, a bit of buzz down there. He's chasing, and that's what we want to see from him. Forward pressure. He had a good game. Caddy quiet in terms of possessions, but he kicked 2 goals. And only one player kicked more than that, and that was Menzies. Pryor was kind of solid. Harrison Jones was pretty quiet, to be honest. He was, probably a bit of a weak link tonight. And, of course, Nick Bryan was injured. So, it was a pretty solid game from the Bombers. 39-point win. We moved to 2-2. Probably going a little bit better than what people think. 3 of our 4 wins, or 3 of our 4 games, should I say, have been reasonable performances. We've only had the one bad game against Adelaide. The other games, against Hawthorn, we were pretty good. Against Port Adelaide, we were pretty good. And this was probably the best game of the season tonight. I guess the issue in terms of the way we've been perceived is that 90% of the narrative around Essendon has been based on the game against Adelaide. That's probably 90% of the narrative, and probably 90% of the opinions people have had on Essendon have been based on that game. But we've shown we're more than one game. We're more than a one-game team. We've, sorted out the defensive part of the game, and this was, a big criticism after the Adelaide game where we conceded 161 points. Well, we conceded 8 goals tonight, and we conceded 8 goals against Port Adelaide last week. So that's 16 goals in 2 weeks. You can't ask for more than that. You concede 60 points one week, 57 points the next. That is elite, at least from a small sample size. Well, hopefully we can continue that against West Coast next week. Just having a look at some of the key stats in the match, probably the most relevant stat I thought, and I thought it was how we controlled the game, and I thought the last quarter was sort of encapsulated that, was the fact that we had about 100 more possessions than Melbourne. We had 448 possessions, which included 244 kicks. And there is such a thing as overpossessing the ball. I don't necessarily think we did overpossess the ball. I just think we controlled the ball. We had less inside 50s, but we were more efficient. We had 43 inside 50s to 51. This is not necessarily a bad thing. We've been the type of team over the last couple of years to bomb it in and get a lot of inside 50s. And I think this can be a little bit of a meaningless stat. I mean, back in 1986, they painted a 50-metre mark on the ground, and just for the sake of television, and everybody started taking stats based on that 50-metre arc in the subsequent years. But if they painted a 40-metre arc or a 25-metre arc, we'd be taking stats because of that. It's really about what you do when you get it in there. And I'd rather get less inside 50s and be more efficient than just bomb it in there with almost zero hope of there being, a score. We lost the clearances by 2. We lost the centre clearances by 9. This was a big part of the game. Melbourne won that particular stat 16-7, but they weren't able to make use of it. Every time they went forward, they just were not able to score, and that's a credit to our defence. We had 296 uncontested possessions to 218, and we also had 5 more contested possessions than Melbourne, 137 to 132. We won time in possession, 46% to 34%. So really, we controlled this game. And I think the fact that we controlled the game, it wasn't just the fact that the players played well. I think you've got to give some credit to Brad Scott. When you control the game in terms of the way the game was played, which we did, you really have to give credit to the coaching staff. He had a good night, I think, tonight in the coach's box. And he gets credit for that. So what did you guys think of this game? I thought pretty much everybody played well. I thought it was a really, really solid game. Check out my other video. I made a video earlier today specifically regarding the Calder Cannons and some of our NGA prospects. For the 3rd week in a row, Adam Swabe was the best player on the ground with 30 possessions, and it looks like he's going to be an Essendon player next year. So hopefully you guys enjoyed the game. Did any of you go to the game? Most of you, I'm assuming, watched it on television. Let me know. And as always, have a great day and go Bombers.